Welcome to Audio Fairy Tales Sleepy Stories, where timeless fairy tales gently lull you into a peaceful night's rest. Tonight, we'll journey into the magical world of the Brothers Grimm, where enchanted forests, kind-hearted heroes, and whimsical wonders await. Close your eyes, take a deep breath, and let the story begin to softly guide you into dreamland. And now, let's begin with our first tale, titled The Almond Tree. Long time ago, perhaps as much as 2,000 years, there was a rich man, and he had a beautiful and pious wife, and they loved each other very much, and they had no children, though they wished greatly for some, and the wife prayed for one day and night. Now, in the courtyard in front of their house stood an almond tree, and one day in winter the wife was standing beneath it and paring an apple, and as she pared it she cut her finger, and the blood fell upon the snow. "Ah," said the woman, sighing deeply and looking down at the blood. "If only I could have a child as red as blood and as white as snow." And as she said these words, her heart suddenly grew light, and she felt sure she should have her wish. So she went back to the house, and when a month had passed the snow was gone. In 2 months everything was green. In 3 months the flowers sprang out of the earth. In 4 months the trees were in full leaf and the branches were thickly entwined. The little birds began to sing, so that the woods echoed and the blossoms fell from the trees. When the 5th month had passed the wife stood under the almond tree, and it smelt so sweet that her heart leaped within her, and she fell on her knees for joy, and when the 6th month had gone, the fruit was thick and fine, and she remained still. And the 7th month she gathered the almonds and ate them eagerly, and was sick and sorrowful. And when the 8th month had passed she called to her husband, and said, weeping, "If I die, bury me under the almond tree." Then she was comforted and happy until the 9th month had passed. And then she bore a child as white as snow and as red as blood. And when she saw it her joy was so great that she died. Her husband buried her under the almond tree, and he wept sore. Time passed, and he became less sad. And after he had grieved a little more he left off, and then he took another wife. His second wife bore him a daughter, and his first wife's child was a son, as red as blood and as white as snow. Whenever the wife looked at her daughter she felt great love for her, but whenever she looked at the little boy, evil thoughts came into her heart, of how she could get all her husband's money for her daughter, and how the boy stood in the way. And so she took great hatred to him, and drove him from one corner to another, and gave him a buffet here and a cuff there, so that the poor child was always in disgrace. When he came back after school hours, there was no peace for him. Once, when the wife went into the room upstairs, her little daughter followed her and said, "Mother, give me an apple." "Yes, my child," said the mother, and gave her a fine apple out of the chest. And the chest had a great heavy lid with a strong iron lock. "Mother," said the little girl, "shall not my brother have one too?" That was what the mother expected, and she said, "Yes, when he comes back from school." And when she saw from the window that he was coming, an evil thought crossed her mind, and she snatched the apple and took it from her little daughter, saying, "You shall not have it before your brother." Then she threw the apple into the chest and shut to the lid. Then the little boy came in at the door, and she said to him in a kind tone, but with evil looks, "My son, will you have an apple?" "Mother," said the boy, "how terrible you look. Yes, give me an apple." Then she spoke as kindly as before, holding up the cover of the chest. "Come here and take out one for yourself." And as the boy was stooping over the open chest, crash went the lid down, so that his head flew off among the red apples. But then the woman felt great terror, and wondered how she could escape the blame. And she went to the chest of drawers in her bedroom and took a white handkerchief out of the nearest drawer, and fitting the head to the neck, she bound them with the handkerchief, so that nothing should be seen, and set him on a chair before the door with the apple in his hand. Then came little Marjorie into the kitchen to her mother, who was standing before the fire stirring a pot of hot water. "Mother," said Marjorie, My brother is sitting before the door and he has an apple in his hand and looks very pale. I asked him to give me the apple, but he did not answer me. It seems very strange. Go again to him, said the mother, and if he will not answer you, give him a box on the ear. So Marjorie went again and said, Brother, give me the apple. But as he took no notice, she gave him a box on the ear, and his head fell off, at which she was greatly terrified, and began to cry and scream, and ran to her mother and said, Oh, Mother.1, I have knocked my brother's head off, and cried and screamed, and would not cease. Oh, Marjorie, said her mother, what have you done? But keep quiet, that no one may see there is anything the matter. It can't be helped now. We will put him out of the way safely. When the father came home and sat down to table, he said, Where is my son? But the mother was filling a great dish full of black broth, and Marjorie was crying bitterly, for she could not refrain. Then the father said again, Where is my son? Oh, said the mother. He is gone into the country to his great-uncle's to stay for a little while. What should he go for? Said the father. And without bidding me goodbye, too. Oh, he wanted to go so much, and he asked me to let him stay there 6 weeks. He will be well taken care of. Dear me, said the father, I am quite sad about it. It was not right of him to go without bidding me goodbye. With that he began to eat, saying, Marjorie, what are you crying for? Your brother will come back sometime. After a while he said, Well, wife, the food is very good. Give me some more. And the more he ate, the more he wanted, until he had eaten it all up, and through the bones under the table. Then Marjorie went to her chest of drawers, and took one of her best handkerchiefs from the bottom drawer, and picked up all the bones from under the table and tied them up in her handkerchief, and went out at the door crying bitterly. She laid them in the green grass under the almond tree, and immediately her heart grew light again, and she wept no more. Then the almond tree began to wave to and fro, and the boughs drew together and then parted, just like a clapping of hands for joy. Then a cloud rose from the tree, and in the midst of the cloud there burned a fire, and out of the fire a beautiful bird arose, and singing most sweetly soared high into the air. And when he had flown away, the almond tree remained as it was before, but the handkerchief full of bones was gone. Marjorie felt quite glad and light-hearted, just as if her brother were still alive. So she went back merrily into the house and had her dinner. The bird, when it flew away, perched on the roof of a goldsmith's house, and began to sing. It was my mother who murdered me. It was my father who ate of me. It was my sister Marjorie, who all my bones in pieces found. Hem in a handkerchief she bound, and laid them under the almond tree. Kiwit, 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 I cry, oh, what a beautiful bird am I! The goldsmith was sitting in his shop making a golden chain, and when he heard the bird, who was sitting on his roof and singing, he started up to go and look, and as he passed over his threshold he lost one of his slippers. And he went into the middle of the street with a slipper on one foot and only a sock on the other, with his apron on, and the gold chain in one hand and the pincers in the other. And so he stood in the sunshine, looking up at the bird. Bird, said he, how beautifully you sing. Do sing that piece over again. No, said the bird, I do not sing for nothing twice. If you will give me that gold chain, I will sing again. Very well, said the goldsmith. Here is the gold chain. Now do as you said. Down came the bird and took the gold chain in his right claw, perched in front of the goldsmith, and sang, It was my mother who murdered me. It was my father who ate of me. It was my sister Marjorie, who all my bones in pieces found. Them in a handkerchief she bound, and laid them under the almond tree. Kiwit, 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 I cry, oh, what a beautiful bird am I! Then the bird flew to a shoemaker's, and perched on his roof, and sang, It was my mother who murdered me. It was my father who ate of me. It was my sister Marjorie, who all my bones in pieces found. Them in a handkerchief she bound, and laid them under the almond tree. Kiewit, 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 I cry. Oh, what a beautiful bird am I! When the shoemaker heard, he ran out of his door in his shirt sleeves and looked up at the roof of his house, holding his hand to shade his eyes from the sun. Bird, said he, how beautifully you sing. Then he called in at his door, Wife, come out directly. Here's a bird singing beautifully, only listen. Then he called his daughter, all his children and acquaintance, both young men and maidens, and they came up the street and gazed on the bird, and saw how beautiful it was with red and green feathers, and round its throat was as it were gold, and its eyes twinkled in its head like stars. Bird, said the shoemaker, do sing that piece over again. No, said the bird, I may not sing for nothing twice. You must give me something. Wife, said the man, go into the shop. On the top shelf stands a pair of red shoes. Bring them here. So the wife went and brought the shoes. Now, bird, said the man, sing us that piece again. And the bird came down and took the shoes in his left claw, and flew up again to the roof and sang, It was my mother who murdered me. It was my father who ate of me. It was my sister Marjorie, who all my bones in pieces found. Hem in a handkerchief she bound, and laid them under the almond tree. Kiewit, 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 I see. Oh, what a beautiful bird am I! And when he had finished he flew away, with the chain in his right claw and the shoes in his left claw, and he flew till he reached a mill, and the mill went clip-clap, clip-clap, clip-clap. And in the mill sat 20 miller's men hewing a millstone, hick-hack, 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 while the mill was going clip-clap, 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 and the bird perched on a linden tree that stood in front of the mill and sang, It was my mother who murdered me. Here one of the men looked up. It was my father who ate of me. Then 2 more looked up and listened. It was my sister Marjorie. Here 4 more looked up, who all my bones in pieces found. Them in a handkerchief she bound. Now there were only 8 left hewing, and laid them under the almond tree. Now only 5. Kiewit, 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 I cry. Now only 1. Oh, what a beautiful bird am I! At length the last one left off, and he only heard the end. Bird, said he, how beautifully you sing. Let me hear it all. Sing that again. No, said the bird, I may not sing it twice for nothing. If you will give me the millstone, I will sing it again. Indeed, said the man, if it belonged to me alone, you should have it. All right, said the others. If he sings again, he shall have it. Then the bird came down, and all the 20 millers heaved up the stone with poles. Yo, heave-ho, yo, heave-ho. And the bird stuck his head through the hole in the middle, and with the millstone round his neck he flew up to the tree and sang, It was my mother who murdered me. It was my father who ate of me. It was my sister Marjorie, who all my bones in pieces found. Them in a handkerchief she bound, and laid them under the almond tree. Kiewit, 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 I cry. Oh, what a beautiful bird am I! And when he had finished, he spread his wings, having in the right claw the chain, and in the left claw the shoes, and round his neck the millstone, and he flew away to his father's house. In the parlor sat the father, the mother, and Marjorie at the table. The father said, How light-hearted and cheerful I feel. Nay, said the mother, I feel very low, just as if a great storm were coming. But Marjorie sat weeping, and the bird came flying and perched on the roof. Oh, said the father, I feel so joyful, and the sun is shining so bright. It is as if I were going to meet with an old friend. Nay, said the wife, I am terrified, my teeth chatter, and there is fire in my veins." And she tore open her dress to get air, and Marjorie sat in a corner and wept, with her plate before her, until it was quite full of tears. Then the bird perched on the almond tree and sang, "It was my mother who murdered me." And the mother stopped her ears and hid her eyes, and would neither see nor hear. Nevertheless, the noise of a fearful storm was in her ears, and in her eyes a quivering and burning as of lightning. "It was my father who ate of me." "Oh, mother," said the father, "there is a beautiful bird singing so finely, and the sun shines, and everything smells as sweet as cinnamon. It was my sister Marjorie." Marjorie hid her face in her lap and wept, and the father said, "I must go out to see the bird." "Oh, do not go," said the wife. "I feel as if the house were on fire." But the man went out and looked at the bird, who all my bones in pieces found. Them in a handkerchief she bound, and laid them under the almond tree. Kiwit, 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 I cry, "Oh, what a beautiful bird am I!" With that the bird let fall the gold chain upon his father's neck, and it fitted him exactly. So he went indoors and said, "Look what a beautiful chain the bird has given me." Then his wife was so terrified that she fell all along on the floor, and her cap came off. Then the bird began again to sing, "It was my mother who murdered me." "Oh," groaned the mother, "that I were 1,000 fathoms underground, so as not to be obliged to hear it. It was my father who ate of me." Then the woman lay as if she were dead. "It was my sister Marjorie." "Oh," said Marjorie, "I will go out too, and see if the bird will give me anything." And so she went, who all my bones in pieces found. Them in a handkerchief she bound. Then he threw the shoes down to her, and laid them under the almond tree. Kiwit, 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 I cry, "Oh, what a beautiful bird am I!" And poor Marjorie all at once felt happy and joyful, and put on her red shoes, and danced and jumped for joy. "Oh dear," said she, "I felt so sad before I went outside, and now my heart is so light. He is a charming bird to have given me a pair of red shoes." But the mother's hair stood on end, and looked like flame, and she said, "Even if the world is coming to an end, I must go out for a little relief." Just as she came outside the door, crash went the millstone on her head, and crushed her flat. The father and daughter rushed out and saw smoke and flames of fire rise up. But when that had gone by, there stood the little brother, and he took his father and Marjorie by the hand, and they felt very happy and content, and went indoors and sat to the table and had their dinner. Wasn't that story just like stepping into a dream? Now that you're even more relaxed, let's wander deeper into the enchanted woods of Grimm's fairy tales. Next, settle in for another tale, titled The Beam. There was once an enchanter who was standing in the midst of a great crowd of people performing his wonders. He had a cock brought in, which lifted a heavy beam and carried it as if it were as light as a feather. But a girl was present who had just found a bit of four-leaved clover, and had thus become so wise that no deception could stand out against her, and she saw that the beam was nothing but a straw. So she cried, "You people, do you not see that it is a straw that the cock is carrying and no beam?" Immediately the enchantment vanished, and the people saw what it was, and drove the magician away in shame and disgrace. He, however, full of inward anger, said, "I will soon revenge myself." After some time the girl's wedding day came, and she was decked out, and went in a great procession over the fields to the place where the church was. All at once she came to a stream which was very much swollen, and there was no bridge and no plank to cross it. Then the bride nimbly took her clothes up, and wanted to wade through it. And just as she was thus standing in the water, a man, and it was the enchanter, cried mockingly close beside her, "Aha! Where are thine eyes that thou takest that for water? Then her eyes were opened, and she saw that she was standing with her clothes lifted up in the middle of a field that was blue with the flowers of blue flax. Then all the people saw it likewise, and chased her away with ridicule and laughter. Wasn't that story just like stepping into a dream? Now that you're even more relaxed, let's wander deeper into the enchanted woods of Grimm's fairy tales. Next, settle in for another tale, titled Bearskin. There was once a young fellow who enlisted as a soldier, conducted himself bravely, and was always the foremost when it rained bullets. So long as the war lasted, all went well, but when peace was made, he received his dismissal, and the captain said he might go where he liked. His parents were dead, and he had no longer a home, so he went to his brothers and begged them to take him in and keep him until war broke out again. The brothers, however, were hard-hearted and said, "What can we do with thee? Thou art of no use to us. Go and make a living for thyself." The soldier had nothing left but his gun. He took that on his shoulder and went forth into the world. He came to a wide heath on which nothing was to be seen but a circle of trees. Under these he sat sorrowfully down and began to think over his fate. "I have no money," thought he. "I have learnt no trade but that of fighting, and now that they have made peace they don't want me any longer. So I see beforehand that I shall have to starve." All at once he heard a rustling, and when he looked round, a strange man stood before him, who wore a green coat and looked right stately, but had a hideous cloven foot. "I know already what thou art in need of," said the man. "Gold and possessions shall thou have, as much as thou canst make away with. Do what thou wilt. But first I must know if thou art fearless, that I may not bestow my money in vain." "A soldier and fear, how can those two things go together?" he answered. "Thou canst put me to the proof." "Very well, then," answered the man. "Look behind thee." The soldier turned round and saw a large bear, which came growling towards him. "Oh ho!" cried the soldier. "I will tickle thy nose for thee, so that thou shalt soon lose thy fancy for growling." And he aimed at the bear and shot it through the muzzle. It fell down and never stirred again. "I see quite well," said the stranger, "that thou art not wanting in courage, but there is still another condition which thou wilt have to fulfill." "If it does not endanger my salvation," replied the soldier, who knew very well who was standing by him. "If it does, I'll have nothing to do with it." "Thou wilt look to that for thyself," answered Greencoat. "Thou shalt for the next 7 years neither wash thyself, nor comb thy beard, nor thy hair, nor cut thy nails, nor say one paternoster. I will give thee a coat and a cloak, which during this time thou must wear. If thou deest during these 7 years, thou art mine. If thou remainest alive, thou art free and rich to boot, for all the rest of thy life." The soldier thought of the great extremity in which he now found himself, and as he so often had gone to meet death, he resolved to risk it now also, and agreed to the terms. The devil took off his green coat, gave it to the soldier, and said, "If thou hast this coat on thy back and puttiest thy hand into the pocket, thou wilt always find it full of money." Then he pulled the skin off the bear and said, "This shall be thy cloak and thy bed also, for thereon shalt thou sleep, and in no other bed shalt thou lie, and because of this apparel shalt thou be called Bearskin." After this the devil vanished. The soldier put the coat on, felt at once in the pocket, and found that the thing was really true. Then he put on the bearskin and went forth into the world, and enjoyed himself, refraining from nothing that did him good and his money harm. During the first year his appearance was passable, but during the second he began to look like a monster. His hair covered nearly the whole of his face. His beard was like a piece of coarse felt. His fingers had claws, and his face was so covered with dirt that if cress had been sown on it, it would have come up. Whosoever saw him ran away, but as he everywhere gave the poor money to pray that he might not die during the 7 years, and as he paid well for everything, he still always found shelter. In the 4th year, he entered an inn where the landlord would not receive him, and would not even let him have a place in the stable, because he was afraid the horses would be scared. But as Bearskin thrust his hand into his pocket and pulled out a handful of ducats, the host let himself be persuaded and gave him a room in an outhouse. Bearskin was, however, obliged to promise not to let himself be seen, lest the inn should get a bad name. As Bearskin was sitting alone in the evening, and wishing from the bottom of his heart that the 7 years were over, he heard a loud lamenting in a neighboring room. He had a compassionate heart, so he opened the door and saw an old man weeping bitterly and wringing his hands. Bearskin went nearer, but the man sprang to his feet and tried to escape from him. At last, when the man perceived that Bearskin's voice was human, he let himself be prevailed on, and by kind words Bearskin succeeded so far that the old man revealed the cause of his grief. His property had dwindled away by degrees. He and his daughters would have to starve, and he was so poor that he could not pay the innkeeper and was to be put in prison. "If that is your only trouble," said Bearskin, "I have plenty of money." He caused the innkeeper to be brought thither, paid him, and put a purse full of gold into the poor old man's pocket besides. When the old man saw himself set free from all his troubles, he did not know how to be grateful enough. "Come with me," said he to Bearskin. "My daughters are all miracles of beauty. Choose one of them for thyself as a wife. When she hears what thou hast done for me, she will not refuse thee. Thou dost in truth look a little strange, but she will soon put thee to rights again." This pleased Bearskin well, and he went. When the eldest saw him, she was so terribly alarmed at his face that she screamed and ran away. The second stood still and looked at him from head to foot, but then she said, "How can I accept a husband who no longer has a human form? The shaven bear that once was here and passed itself off for a man pleased me far better, for at any rate it wore a hussar's dress and white gloves. If it were nothing but ugliness, I might get used to that." The youngest, however, said, "Dear father, that must be a good man to have helped you out of your trouble. So if you have promised him a bride for doing it, your promise must be kept." It was a pity that Bearskin's face was covered with dirt and with hair, for if not they might have seen how delighted he was when he heard these words. He took a ring from his finger, broke it in two, and gave her one half, the other he kept for himself. He wrote his name, however, on her half and hers on his, and begged her to keep her peace carefully, and then he took his leave and said, "I must still wander about for 3 years, and if I do not return then, thou art free, for I shall be dead. But pray to God to preserve my life." The poor betrothed bride dressed herself entirely in black, and when she thought of her future bridegroom, tears came into her eyes. Nothing but contempt and mockery fell to her lot from her sisters. "Take care," said the eldest. "If thou givest him thy hand, he will strike his claws into it." "Beware," said the second. "Bears like sweet things, and if he takes a fancy to thee, he will eat thee up. Thou must always do as he likes," began the elder again, "or else he will growl." And the second continued, "But the wedding will be a merry one, for bears dance well." The bride was silent, and did not let them vex her. Bearskin, however, traveled about the world from one place to another, did good where he was able, and gave generously to the poor that they might pray for him. At length, as the last day of the 7 years dawned, he went once more out on to the heath, and seated himself beneath the circle of trees. It was not long before the wind whistled, and the devil stood before him and looked angrily at him. Then he threw Bearskin his old coat, and asked for his own green one back. "We have not got so far as that yet," answered Bearskin. "Thou must first make me clean." Whether the devil liked it or not, he was forced to fetch water and wash Bearskin, comb his hair, and cut his nails. After this, he looked like a brave soldier, and was much handsomer than he had ever been before. When the devil had gone away, Bearskin was quite light-hearted. He went into the town, put on a magnificent velvet coat, seated himself in a carriage drawn by 4 white horses, and drove to his bride's house. No one recognized him. The father took him for a distinguished general and led him into the room where his daughters were sitting. He was forced to place himself between the 2 eldest. They helped him to wine, gave him the best pieces of meat, and thought that in all the world they had never seen a handsomer man. The bride, however, sat opposite to him in her black dress, and never raised her eyes, nor spoke a word. When at length he asked the father if he would give him one of his daughters to wife, the 2 eldest jumped up, ran into their bedrooms to put on splendid dresses, for each of them fancied she was the chosen one. The stranger, as soon as he was alone with his bride, brought out his half of the ring, and threw it in a glass of wine which he reached across the table to her. She took the wine, but when she had drunk it, and found the half ring lying at the bottom, her heart began to beat. She got the other half, which she wore on a ribbon round her neck, joined them, and saw that the 2 pieces fitted exactly together. Then said he, "I am thy betrothed bridegroom, whom thou sawest as Bearskin, but through God's grace I have again received my human form, and have once more become clean." He went up to her, embraced her, and gave her a kiss. In the meantime the 2 sisters came back in full dress, and when they saw that the handsome man had fallen to the share of the youngest, and heard that he was Bearskin, they ran out full of anger and rage. One of them drowned herself in the well, the other hanged herself on a tree. In the evening, someone knocked at the door, and when the bridegroom opened it, it was the devil in his green coat, who said, "Sayest thou, I have now got 2 souls in the place of thy one? Wasn't that story just like stepping into a dream? Now that you're even more relaxed, let's wander deeper into the enchanted woods of Grimm's fairy tales. Next, settle in for another tale, titled, The Bittern and the Hoopoe." "Where do you like best to feed your flocks?" said a man to an old cowherd. "Here, sir, where the grass is neither too rich nor too poor, or else it is no use." "Why not?" asked the man. "Do you hear that melancholy cry from the meadow there?" answered the shepherd. "That is the bittern. He was once a shepherd, and so was the hoopoe also. I will tell you the story. The bittern pastured his flocks on rich green meadows where flowers grew in abundance. So his cows became wild and unmanageable. The hoopoe drove his cattle onto high barren hills, where the wind plays with the sand, and his cows became thin and got no strength. When it was evening, and the shepherds wanted to drive their cows homewards, the bittern could not get his together again. They were too high-spirited and ran away from him. He called, "Come, cows, come." But it was of no use. They took no notice of his calling. The hoopoe, however, could not even get his cows up on their legs. So faint and weak had they become. "Up, up, up," screamed he, but it was in vain. They remained lying on the sand. That is the way when one has no moderation. And to this day, though they have no flocks now to watch, the bittern cries, "Come, cows, come." And the hoopoe, "Up, up, up." Wasn't that story just like stepping into a dream? Now that you're even more relaxed, let's wander deeper into the enchanted woods of Grimm's fairy tales. Next, settle in for another tale, titled, The Blue Light. There was once on a time a soldier who for many years had served the king faithfully, but when the war came to an end could serve no longer because of the many wounds which he had received. The king said to him, "Thou mayst return to thy home. I need thee no longer, and thou wilt not receive any more money, for he only receives wages who renders me service for them." Then the soldier did not know how to earn a living, went away greatly troubled, and walked the whole day, until in the evening he entered a forest. When darkness came on, he saw a light, which he went up to, and came to a house wherein lived a witch. "Do give me 1 night's lodging, and a little to eat and drink," said he to her, "or I shall starve." "Oh ho!" she answered. "Who gives anything to a runaway soldier? Yet will I be compassionate and take you in, if you will do what I wish." "What do you wish?" said the soldier. "That you should dig all round my garden for me tomorrow." The soldier consented, and next day labored with all his strength, but could not finish it by the evening. "I see well enough," said the witch, "that you can do no more today, but I will keep you yet another night, in payment for which you must tomorrow chop me a load of wood and make it small." The soldier spent the whole day in doing it, and in the evening the witch proposed that he should stay 1 night more. "Tomorrow you shall only do me a very trifling piece of work. Behind my house there is an old dry well, into which my light has fallen. It burns blue and never goes out, and you shall bring it up again for me." Next day the old woman took him to the well and let him down in a basket. He found the blue light and made her a signal to draw him up again. She did draw him up, but when he came near the edge, she stretched down her hand and wanted to take the blue light away from him. "No," said he, perceiving her evil intention. "I will not give thee the light until I am standing with both feet upon the ground." The witch fell into a passion, let him down again into the well, and went away. The poor soldier fell without injury on the moist ground, and the blue light went on burning. But of what use was that to him? He saw very well that he could not escape death. He sat for a while very sorrowfully. Then suddenly he felt in his pocket and found his tobacco pipe, which was still half full. "This shall be my last pleasure," thought he, pulled it out, lit it at the blue light, and began to smoke. When the smoke had circled about the cavern, suddenly a little black dwarf stood before him and said, "Lord, what are thy commands?" "What commands have I to give thee?" replied the soldier, quite astonished. "I must do everything thou biddest me," said the little man. "Good," said the soldier. "Then in the first place help me out of this well." The little man took him by the hand and led him through an underground passage, but he did not forget to take the blue light with him. On the way the dwarf showed him the treasures which the witch had collected and hidden there, and the soldier took as much gold as he could carry. When he was above, he said to the little man, "Now go and bind the old witch and carry her before the judge." In a short time she, with frightful cries, came riding by, as swift as the wind on a wild tomcat. Nor was it long after that before the little man reappeared. "It is all done," said he, "and the witch is already hanging on the gallows. What further commands has my lord?" inquired the dwarf. "At this moment none," answered the soldier. "Thou canst return home, only be at hand immediately if I summon thee. Nothing more is needed than that thou shouldst light thy pipe at the blue light, and I will appear before thee at once." Thereupon he vanished from his sight. The soldier returned to the town from which he had come. He went to the best inn, ordered himself handsome clothes, and then bade the landlord furnish him a room as handsomely as possible. When it was ready and the soldier had taken possession of it, he summoned the little black mannikin and said, "I have served the king faithfully, but he has dismissed me and left me to hunger, and now I want to take my revenge." "What am I to do?" asked the little man. "Late at night, when the king's daughter is in bed, bring her here in her sleep. She shall do servant's work for me." The mannikin said, "That is an easy thing for me to do, but a very dangerous thing for you, for if it is discovered, you will fare ill." When 12 o'clock had struck, the door sprang open, and the mannikin carried in the princess. "Aha! Art thou there?" cried the soldier. "Get to thy work at once. Fetch the broom and sweep the chamber." When she had done this, he ordered her to come to his chair, and then he stretched out his feet and said, "Pull off my boots for me." and then he threw them in her face and made her pick them up again and clean and brighten them. She, however, did everything he bade her, without opposition, silently and with half-shut eyes. When the first cock crowed, the mannequin carried her back to the royal palace and laid her in her bed. Next morning, when the princess arose, she went to her father and told him that she had had a very strange dream. "I was carried through the streets with the rapidity of lightning," said she, "and taken into a soldier's room, and I had to wait upon him like a servant, sweep his room, clean his boots, and do all kinds of menial work. It was only a dream, and yet I am just as tired as if I really had done everything." "The dream may have been true," said the king. "I will give thee a piece of advice. Fill thy pocket full of peas, and make a small hole in it, and then if thou art carried away again, they will fall out and leave a track in the streets." But unseen by the king, the mannequin was standing beside him when he said that, and heard all. At night, when the sleeping princess was again carried through the streets, some peas certainly did fall out of her pocket, but they made no track, for the crafty mannequin had just before scattered peas in every street there was. And again the princess was compelled to do servant's work until cockcrow. Next morning the king sent his people out to seek the track, but it was all in vain, for in every street poor children were sitting, picking up peas and saying, "It must have rained peas last night." "We must think of something else," said the king. "Keep thy shoes on when thou goest to bed, and before thou comest back from the place where thou art taken, hide one of them there. I will soon contrive to find it." The black mannequin heard this plot, and at night, when the soldier again ordered him to bring the princess, revealed it to him, and told him that he knew of no expedient to counteract this stratagem, and that if the shoe were found in the soldier's house it would go badly with him. "Do what I bid thee," replied the soldier, and again this third night the princess was obliged to work like a servant, but before she went away, she hid her shoe under the bed. Next morning the king had the entire town searched for his daughter's shoe. It was found at the soldier's, and the soldier himself, who at the entreaty of the dwarf had gone outside the gate, was soon brought back and thrown into prison. In his flight he had forgotten the most valuable things he had, the blue light and the gold, and had only 1 ducat in his pocket. And now, loaded with chains, he was standing at the window of his dungeon, when he chanced to see one of his comrades passing by. The soldier tapped at the pane of glass, and when this man came up, said to him, "Be so kind as to fetch me the small bundle I have left lying in the inn, and I will give you a ducat for doing it." His comrade ran thither and brought him what he wanted. As soon as the soldier was alone again, he lighted his pipe and summoned the black mannequin. "Have no fear," said the latter to his master. "Go wheresoever they take you, and let them do what they will, only take the blue light with you." Next day the soldier was tried, and though he had done nothing wicked, the judge condemned him to death. When he was led forth to die, he begged a last favor of the king. "What is it?" asked the king. "That I may smoke 1 more pipe on my way." "Thou mayst smoke 3, answered the king, "but do not imagine that I will spare thy life." Then the soldier pulled out his pipe and lighted it at the blue light, and as soon as a few wreaths of smoke had ascended, the mannequin was there with a small cudgel in his hand, and said, "What does my lord command?" "Strike down to earth that false judge there, and his constable, and spare not the king who has treated me so ill." Then the mannequin fell on them like lightning, darting this way and that way, and whosoever was so much as touched by his cudgel fell to earth, and did not venture to stir again. The king was terrified. He threw himself on the soldier's mercy, and merely to be allowed to live at all, gave him his kingdom for his own, and the princess to wife. And so, our journey through the world of Grimm fairy tales comes to a close, for now. May the magic, wonder, and quiet lessons of these timeless stories stay with you as you drift into a deep and restful sleep. Good night, dreamer. Let the stars watch over you, and may your dreams be as magical as the tales we've shared tonight. From all of us at Audio Fairy Tales Sleepy Stories,